Well, hello, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us on the last day of the Brand Innovators Conference. My name's Mike Forrest from a company called Circus Street, digital training and capability company, working with lots of organizations and lots of beauty companies. It's my first time in Texas. Woohoo! Really pleased to be here in person and alongside Carolyn Dawkins, CMO at Clinique. So please join me in giving Carolyn a warm welcome as well. So we're here today to talk about innovation in marketing broadly. We're here to talk about the beauty industry, some exciting trends and opportunities that are taking place, the changing role of the CMO and the marketing function, and keeping up with those pesky consumers and their changing habits. So
we would never call them that. We love our consumers. So if anyone is using Clinique in the room, thank you.
Awesome. So, Carolyn, thanks for joining us today. For those of us here who have been on another planet for years, tell us about Clinique and Clinique's role within the group of Estée Lauder companies.
Yeah, so we are, for those of you who don't know Clinique, and I hope there's not many of you, we are one of the most long-standing prestige skincare brands, right? So we've been around for, I think, since like 1968. And we were the first dermatological developed prestige skincare brand. And I think what's super interesting for our brand back then is that we were launched under this premise of there is no such thing as, the same skin type, the same skin tone across every consumer. And back then, I mean, none of us would know, right? Like it was thick, it was fragranced, it was very, there was just one size fits all for everyone, right? And we know like today's consumer wouldn't touch that with a barge pole. And back then, we were a brand that came through and we said, let's rip this all up, let's change it, we'll come in with a personalized, customized solution all the way back then. And I think there's so many amazing tenets that are still relevant for our brand today. So every consumer that came into our brand, back in the day, we wouldn't sell anyone a product unless we did a really thorough skin diagnostic. So our skin diagnostics, they were actually based on derm protocols. So we have these phenomenal Clinique consultants. If you've ever walked into one of our counters, they actually run a diagnostic based on derm protocols. And today they also use a lot of high-tech tools that our team developed. But that would allow us to better understand what is your specific skin type, your specific skin concern, and then customize a solution based off the back of that. And honestly, the brand has just gone from strength to strength as a result of that. And I think anytime you have, these really long-standing brands, there's been, peaks and troughs along the journey. And I think what's exciting for us today is as consumers came back post-COVID, and I think with inflation as well, consumers are reevaluating the brands they're purchasing today more than ever before. And I think there's a huge swing to trusted, proven brands. And we were caught up in this cycle of new is new is new is new. There was an indie brand, there was an influencer launching a brand, there's a celebrity launching a brand, rinse and repeat every other day. But I think what consumers have really come to acknowledge is that all of this newness, it's not always trusted. It's not always proven, and it's not a great investment when they're really starting to be very careful with the way they're spending their money. So that is a huge win for us, and I think a brand that is built on such deep science, like throughout COVID, right? I think, with the scientists, no one values science more than our consumers today, and that allows us, I think, with that beautiful backbone. I don't know if you've been seeing some of the innovation that we're doing, whether we're in the metaverse or, everything that we're doing on social and TikTok and some of our services, and we'll talk about it today, but it's given us license to where we're innovating a brand.
Thank you, Carolyn. And yeah, with that in mind, that trust, that brand equity that's so important, and, maintaining that trust with your consumers who have potentially been with you since you launched that first line in 1968. How important is it to keep innovating, releasing new products and brands, but at the same time maintain that core belief in your core products and brands?
Yeah, so I think we look at it in two different ways, and I spent a little bit of time at Google, so I use this analogy a lot with my team, right? At Google, there's a set of engineers that are ensuring that search is relevant every single day of the week. They would never let search die. It is a diamond, it is, a jewel in their crown that they would never die. But at the same time, right, you've got the Google X team that are putting out what are these moonshots? What do we need to do? How do we need to kind of map to where we think the consumer's going? And so that's how I structure my team. How do I maintain these diamonds that we have? And how do I put the right, moonshots kind of out there to bet where we're going? So, a couple of things that we do, right? I don't know if any of you guys have seen some of the, the momentum that we had around a product that's called Almost Lipstick in the shade of Black Honey. This product is 50 years old, and it just went viral on TikTok. We cannot keep this bloody thing on the shelf. Every time we put it back on the shelf, it sells out again. So what happened was, for these Gen Z consumers, they're discovering our brand for the first time. And I think one of the things that is so relevant about this product is it was built for every skin tone. The shade actually adjusts on your lip tone. And so these diverse set of influencers, they picked it up. They started crafting content around it. And then we got behind it. We started crafting content, pushing media dollars behind it, and off it went. And so we do a lot of that, constantly re-engineering long-term products, whether we're, finding new benefits in the same way, that engineer team would on search, new features to tell the consumer about, upgraded packaging, tweaking, etc. And then on the other side of the equation, we're really focusing on, what is new, better, and different that we need to bring to the market to pick up a new consumer that we haven't been able to attract to the brand. So I think that's the way we look at it. And it's also more than just product, right? Like that Google X team of my own. These are the guys that are driving us into the metaverse. These are the guys that are driving, the virtual services that we are so aggressive on right now. So yeah, I guess that's the way we think about it.
Great, and I guess it's always key. The main objective is always to anchor back to the greater good, the purpose of providing great skin for all. Clinique, as Carolyn's described, they're trying to be the most inclusive, diverse, optimistic, provide the most optimistic skincare experiences for their consumer. So always anchoring back to that, I guess, is always, regardless of whether it's an old brand, a trusted brand, or a new brand, that's where you anchor back to. That's your
I think even this morning we had a meeting about we're trying to map our next steps in terms of what is our metaverse roadmap. And so some of our leaders on the team were like, it should be about loyalty. And I'm like, no, it's not about loyalty. Loyalty is one of the executional levers. It is about our mandate will be about creating the most inclusive and diverse metaverse experience that we can for our consumers, because that's the tenet of the brand. And so we stay up there constantly because that gives us the scope, and it gives us, I think, the excitement to bring the new thinking to the consumers. It helps us a lot. I think, we were just watching Steve Jobs talk about some of the Apple values back when they were, what was it, think differently or think different. I can't remember the exact verbatim. But that having a very clear point of view on your brand values is so important more than ever before, particularly as you start to map into new channels and new platforms. Because I think, I was sitting on a panel yesterday and some of the agencies were like, slow down, brands, really map out what you're trying to do in the space and, think it through and make sure you get it right. Well, but if you guys were sitting back when we were trying to make these pivots away from TV and print, my God, that slowed us down. I remember what I had to do. I was at L'Oreal. To get us onto YouTube, I had to not show anyone the creative. I couldn't show anyone the concept. If I got it wrong, I was going to get fired. And I was like, well, how am I going to do this? And I'm like, you don't create that narrative for us again today. If you're not a practitioner in the space, there is no room to be a voyeur. Do not sit and watch this. Get in there and be a practitioner, because that is the only way to move your brand forward. You won't get it right. There is no right in these spaces yet. We're on a really rapid clip of evolution, and I think it's about what is your brand value, and then let's make sure that you continually, disseminate that and evolve against that so you're winning in the space.
So it sounds like you're encouraging your teams to challenge the status quo. You're not happy to sit there and wait and follow. You want to be diving in head first, head and feet first. So
true.
How do you create that culture, that environment that gives your teams the autonomy and the permission to try things and fail and optimize and learn?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think at Estee Lauder we have this model where we call it, leadership from every chair, and it's very much about empowering the teams and letting them, generate the thinking. The team that I have leading, my integrated marketing group, they are some of the sharpest thinkers in this space. And you know what I just try and do? Make sure that no one gets in their way. Let me pull all of the barriers out of their way. When senior leadership are like, I don't know, this is a lot of money, Carolyn. I don't know, this doesn't sound like a priority to us. Well, let me remind you why. And let me kind of constantly try and architect the resources back in their favor. And so I can kind of get the noise out of their way. So that's one of the things that I do. I think in today's landscape too, with, we have more younger talent on our teams than ever before, which is such a joy. But we also need to modify our leadership style. And I learned the idea of, radical candor at Google, this idea of giving someone, like, with the humility and the gentleness of feedback, whether it's, the good stuff or the constructive stuff, but then giving them that space to give it back to you can create a safer space to have more of these tough, dynamic, constant conversations. And I practice that a lot with my team. Even my kids love to give me radically candid feedback. Maybe I need less of that. But no, I think it's really important. And the guys do. They give me a ton of candid feedback where it's great, where it's not great, what they need me to do differently, what they need me to do better. And I think that helps everyone feel a little bit safer to take these risks as well.
Interesting. Yeah, it's important, I guess, to remember that leadership is a two-way street. And not just a kind of top-down approach is creating that, fostering that culture. So thinking about your role as CMO, I work closely with lots of CMOs. It feels like their job gets bigger and more complex and more broad every year as new technologies and consumer expectations raise. How do you manage that complexity? How do you prioritize? And then how do you kind of lead the marketing function in line with that?
Yeah, so I think, all CMOs, right, like we're in the service of how do we deliver brand growth? How do we deliver business growth? And I think just in terms of how we achieve that continues to change year on year. And I think in order to be an effective CMO, you have to be in a constant state of learning. And I've worked across a diverse set of organizations, a diverse set of industries, and I think the one thing I've learned along the way is the answer never sits inside of your category. So I spend a lot of time like looking at external categories, different industries, trying to find synergies, then going deep in our category, what are our competitors doing, and then going deep in terms of like what are the strengths and what are the gaps that I have in my brand, like what do I need to lever up and lever down. And so I think being in this constant learning mode and challenging your team to be in these constant learning modes, I think is really critical. I think what then sits underneath that, right, is this idea of test, learn, iterate, test, learn, iterate. And so giving your team space to do that. So I think I do that. We do that really well on certain teams, and we're still on a journey on other teams. Our digitally facing teams are so much easier to get there. I've obviously got to get my product team there a little more, but I think that's a really important piece underneath it. And then I think that also then, one of the things I talk about to my team a lot is a lot of the bets that you're placing today, they're not at the size and the growth that they will be, but you almost have to model and predict where they're going to go and invest in it today so you can win. Some of us as brands, we were so slow on social, and the competitors that were faster, some of it just, if you just run like the sheer mathematic models, unless you significantly overinvest it, you're never going to get there. But there are new platforms today where it's still pretty nascent. Like you still have an opportunity to be a leader in that space. And so that's what I think we've gotten better at as well, like really taking a bold stance on where are they going. Now let's invest as though they're already there. And I think we're seeing some great wins off the back of that.
Great, and obviously the last 2 years have been pretty hectic. What kind of macro trends have you seen either accelerating that you're excited about? How have your teams adapted to that? And what challenges have been in the way? What challenges have been really hard to crack over the last 2 years?
No, for sure. I think one of the first, I guess, the big macro shifts that we've seen is consumers coming back towards trusted, proven brands and the value of science. Like that has just been a big swing, which is, it's exceptional, and I really do think it's here to stay. I think particularly with inflation doing what it's doing, consumers are challenging, what is the value of this equation more than ever before? And so this idea of, show, don't tell, prove it to me, is more inherent than ever before. I think some of the other interesting things for us is, I don't know, how many times have you heard, like, brands need to be content creators, right? Like, oh God, how many conversations did we have on that as we were entering social and YouTube? And you couldn't figure out the ROI. You could not make that work. Like we were not these content engines. Yet I think what we've learned throughout COVID as well is what is the type of commerce-driven content that's working for our brands. We are running so much more social selling and social commerce content than ever before that just continues to pay back. So I think we're learning so much more in that space. We can be content engines and still deliver the ROI that we're looking for. So we do a lot of live streaming. You've probably seen our Clinique consultants. They're across our Instagram and TikTok handles. We use them across our own handles. They are so credible. They're such phenomenal talent. They can tell the stories often better, than our advertising can. So I think thinking it through, like, what is that content engine in the spirit of commerce, it will just continue to bifurcate. And I think we know, right, like all of these new platforms, and we know, like, I'm not going to tell you about all the growth rates of TikTok and the metaverse, all of that. But I think what's interesting is it's a new model of discovering brands. It's a whole new model of discovering a brand, building a relationship with a brand, and buying a brand, where these consumers may never touch our platforms. They may never come towards a known platform. And so what is it that we do as a result of that? Like, what do we need to do to modify, to sit around that? So what do I do with the teams? I'm constantly, working with my VPs to understand, well, where have we got the right capabilities? Are we good? Are we strong? What do we need to do to reinforce that? We shift around a lot. I shift priorities around a lot. You've got to be really agile with your team. And then I think for me, because of the way some of our creative is in-house at Clinique, and I've worked in different organizations where the agency is the creative and they're outside and they're inside, and so many different models. Right now, I really don't believe in an agency of record unless it is based on a gap that you have in your capability, and then go deep with these guys, and then run, and keep evaluating along the way. Like, when do I need to bring this in-house, or do I ever need to bring this in-house? So that's, I guess, they're the things I'm thinking through.
Yeah, the pendulum's definitely swung the other way in terms of brands now asking agencies to prove their value and their worth. What are you going to add? Have you got something that complements or augments what we already have internally? So that's really interesting. What about the CMO role or the marketing function? Would you like to change or see kind of move in a different direction?
Yeah, I think I'd answer that in two ways. I think measurement still drives me bananas. Like, digital's been an amazing space to innovate, and it's created like so many new opportunities for the brands. But it's also just continued to exacerbate this issue we have with measurement, and it's not on the horizon to being solved anytime soon. I don't know if you guys were tracking some of the upfronts, but Disney came out and they said, you know what, guys, we've got this amazing new technology, we've got so much more data, we're going to show you advertisers that you're going to be more efficient in finding your audiences and more efficient in tracking your campaign performance. And it only took a partnership with over 100 vendors in order for us to deliver this to you. And I'm like, my goodness, like, we're still here, right? And if you're playing in TikTok and you're testing things out on the metaverse, that measurement is just, it's so far in that rear view mirror for these guys. So I think as CMOs and as leaders in the industry, this is time now to start to put some muscle on the partners, because it just will not solve. Like, it's in no one's interest but our own. And I think it's really important particularly for the CMO and the marketing functions in the brand, because I need the organization to pivot their resources. I need them to understand that the consumer's pivoting. And so I need a better source of growth. I need one view of the consumer. I need to turn up to, my C-suite with business metrics, not marketing lingo. They don't want to hear all of that sort of stuff. I need to consolidate it back up to true business growth metrics. And I need more help there. So I think that's a big one. And then I think what sits underneath that is just ensuring that, the C-suite need to be on journey with us in terms of this innovation frontier. It's not just our role. I have to do a lot of work in terms of finessing and bringing people along, which honestly, on Clinique, they've been exceptional. But I would love that onus on more of our C-suite.
So bringing leadership, getting their advocacy, bringing them along on the journey is obviously key. In terms of your peer group in the C-suite, talk to us about collaboration. So who are your allies? Who helps you to prove effectiveness and show the business impact that marketing's having? Obviously, lots of organizations now have chief brand officers, chief growth officers, information officers, etc. How does that look in Clinique, and how do you kind of balance, I guess, building that relationship and collaboration whilst at the same time remaining to kind of uphold your role as the custodian of the consumer, the voice of the customer?
Yeah, I think you have to rethink who your stakeholders are. I think for us right now, like the team that are blowing me away, it's our IT team. Like they are in this to win this. Like they are in there, they want to grow, they're challenging the status quo. So they've become a really serious partner for us, whereas, they weren't so much in the past. And they're at the table with us. They're forging the relationships. They're helping us build our roadmaps as well. Finance is key. Finance, a CMO, I think it was a Google article that talked about the relationship that needs to happen between the CMO and the CFO. So I spent a lot of time there, and that's, super critical for us, and it's paying off. But even, relationships like legal and regulatory, like as you take, the brand into these new spaces, you need them just as much. Yes, you know who your traditional stakeholders are, but there's a whole new team of stakeholders that you really need to make sure they're on the journey with you. And I was just talking to my team about it this morning, right? Like we have to find ways to bring them on this journey, because otherwise it becomes an us and them. And we've been there, right? We've been there with these old, what is old technology now, with what happened on YouTube and Instagram. I don't want to do that again. I want these guys I want it to be so seamless that everyone kind of gets a positive blowback from the results.
Questions?
Yeah, sure. Please, if anybody has any questions, we have time for a couple of questions.
I love you. You're always out. The first question asked, I'm like, let's go.
But by the way,
Don't move.
and by the way, there's a lot of accents up here. I don't know if you can tell. I'm from London. Carolyn's from Australia. So thanks for bearing with us. I'm wearing my wallabies in honour of Australia as well today. So, sorry, please.
No, thank you. So as we're in such an evolving ecosystem and industry, what is a piece of advice, and both of you can answer this, that you would give to the next generation of marketing leaders who are looking to come into their roles and themselves as leaders?
I think one of the things that works for me is that everything that you're seeing today has almost happened before, right? Like there's so many synergies. And because what you need to do is you need to align senior leaders, like senior leaders who may not be aware or as comfortable in the space as you are. So how do you draw on these synergies, right? Like a great example, TikTok that's happening today, like that's YouTube back in the 2000s. They look so similar, right? It's the same thing. They've just got a better algorithm, but it's so similar. And the same thing, like where Coinbase is going with their social trading, eToro is already there with their social financial trading. Like everything has some sort of direct relationship. And I think if you can draw on those synergies and you can use that to decode it for senior leaders, I think you will be able to accelerate much faster.
You're also allowed to call on people from the audience if you choose.
Just randomly pick some people out.
Yeah, no, thank you for your time. This is excellent. I really appreciate it. Can you guys hear me? Am I showing up right? All right.
You're good.
All right, excellent. So out of curiosity, just really curious to know how you're empowering the next generation of girls and women through your brand holistically.
Yeah, so I think we do a lot for internal, and we do a lot externally too. I think, we're such a long-standing brand that we've made some big pivots to really increase so much more representation on the brand. And we've got some pretty decent stats as well in terms of, and I don't know if you track us on social or if you've seen any of our, earned and our paid media, but there's a lot that we do in the space. So if you have a look at the talent that's on social, if you have a look at even the talent that we work with to get the assets up, has become so much more diverse. We've increased the volume of Spanish language on a lot of our own platforms. We've changed our customer care models to increase, like what language you respond to us in, we respond back to you in, which, some of this stuff may be like, oh, that's that of course you should, but not a lot of brands actually do that. It's kind of crazy. We also have externally, we're in the conference next week in Boston. There's a big science conference where we actually take a lot of white papers every year. We do a lot of clinical testing and a very diverse set of consumers, probably some of the most diverse, particularly around skin concerns that really over-index with those consumers. So we bring those learnings in and we share them with the industry. We also are doing a lot in terms of, we're starting to do a lot more in terms of empowering more black dermatologists. There's some big gaps there in terms of black students coming through as dermatologists, and as a result, a lot of black consumers say, I don't feel like I can see representation for me when I want to talk to someone about a skin concern. So we do a lot of work there in terms of grassroots. And then internally, I think Estée Lauder's invested a lot. I think we did a big program called leading from every chair, and the organisation just invested millions in it, where they brought in external thought leaders, external strategists in terms of what do we need to do differently. So many diverse talents in the organisation were given direct access and able to connect with a senior leader in the organisation as a mentor and a sponsor. So there's a lot that we're doing in that, but could we always do more? Yes, we could always do more. So we know we're still on the journey there. So more to come.
So, yes. No, I'm so excited to hear. It's funny that you say black dermatologist because I'm like, that's like a unicorn to me. Like, I don't even think I've ever seen. What is that? But I'm super excited that you guys are, and I feel like all the pieces that you're doing on the diversity, and I guess broader Estée as well. What are you most excited about? Like, next 3-5 years, like what like if you could accomplish or achieve a piece with Clinique, like what would those next 3 to 5 years be?
I think the hardest thing to work on is long-standing brands. You have to balance the DNA, and you have to take it forward. And I think we've all, I've worked on so many different brands where you're either in the right phase of the cycle or, you've missed a phase of the cycle and you've got to play catch up. We're in a great phase of the cycle right now. We don't know what the next 3 years are going to look like. And I don't want to put a stamp on the wall and say it's bad. But what I do need to do is make sure that I'm moving quickly and dropping things quickly. Like, I'm super proud of what we did on NFTs. We turned that around in weeks. Like, for a brand that was historically, it's been very thoughtful. It's a brand